This is my conversation with Dan Liljeqvist, CEO of Herrmans Bike Components. Hermans is a Finnish manufacturer with 67 years of history that most cyclists have never heard of, even though their products are most likely on a bike that you've ridden or bought. Hermans built its reputation as a world-class OEM supplier of grips, lights, and rim tape, quietly powering some of the biggest e-bike brands from a highly automated factory in Western Finland. Now, after a private equity transition and a brutal post-COVID correction, they're attempting something new, building a consumer-facing brand in the competitive European aftermarket. Dan walks us through what it takes to manufacture competitively in Europe and why the leap from anonymous supplier to recognized brand is one of the hardest moves a manufacturer can make. This is the Business of Cycling podcast. Dan, thank you so much. How do I say your last name? I'm sorry.
So it's Liljeqvist. So
Liljeqvist. Okay.
International name.
Yes. Is that a Finnish name?
It's a Swedish name.
Swedish name. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to speak today. We're talking with a Finnish brand. You are the CEO of the brand Hermans. How do you say that? Am I saying that right? Hermans?
Yes. Also right. Yes. Hermans.
Okay.
Yep.
So I was excited. We met at Villefoli, and I was interested because your brand is going through an interesting path throughout its life, and you've been there the whole time. And so, we spoke briefly. I'm always out looking for interesting stories in the industry, interesting paths, interesting situations. And Hermans was interesting because the company was a family-owned company. Then some investors came on board, and now you're moving from, or your main focus has typically been OEM, providing OEM products to brands. And now you are undertaking brand building and direct to consumer, or I guess you could say aftermarket strategy. So we're going to get to walk through that and talk kind of how you're doing that. But you're sort of a really constant figure in the company. And so that was why I wanted to talk with you. You've been there through most of the company's history, and obviously you're the CEO. And so maybe just to get started, can you tell me kind of where does this podcast find you today? And maybe then you can tell me a little bit about your background.
Yes. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So my background is kind of born in Scandinavia, I call it. So heritage from Sweden, and then lived in Finland my adult life, working in different international companies throughout the career. So technical background, then working in highly automated industries, so working with selling automation solutions for mainly European customers, but also US-based customer in the past.
So you're Swedish?
Yes, so Swedish originally.
But you're working in Finland. This is a Finnish company.
Correct. Yes.
And so do you speak in English? Do you speak in Swedish? Do you speak in Finnish? What language do you speak in the office?
So in the office, it's basically three languages, those you mentioned. So there are some who only speak Finnish, then we speak Finnish. Or if there is a mix that you have some Swedes, Finns, then it's English. So I would say the official language is English, whereas in the production is Finnish, Swedish, depending on who you talk to, so to say. So it's actually those three languages.
But Finnish is quite different from Swedish, right?
It's completely different.
How did you learn it?
So for me, I learned it in my first job I had when I was 10, 11 years. I worked with trotting horses, and then they were purely Finnish speaking, and then I really learned to talk. And also in the school, of course, you in your school here, you learn the Finnish language as well.
Okay. And so, wow. So you very Nordic, like we're talking, this is as Nordic as it gets here.
I would say so, yeah. So yeah.
That's another thing. It's exciting to kind of hear. So before we get into the business, like what is the Nordic cycling? Tell me about the Nordic cyclist. Like, is it more road, more mountain? Like what's happening right now in the Nordic region from your point of view?
So I would say in terms of cycling, road cycling is still relatively small in the Nordic regions, maybe a little bit more in Sweden. And of course, you have from you have some upcoming teams there trying to reach the highest level. In Norway, you have the Uno X, so they are still, in the pro peloton. But road, I would say, pretty small. So I think it's more like a mountain bike, fat bike, and now, of course, the gravel is the main growing area. And the reason is we have tarmac, but we don't have so good infra on the tarmac roads. It's not so safe, not a lot of cycling roads, but we have a lot of gravel roads
Trails.
around. So like in Finland,
Yeah.
gravel roads going around lakes, up in smaller mountains and so on. So I think gravel is really taking its place. Also the races are growing. So, but still Nordic is a pretty small cycling kind of region compared to elsewhere
Europe,
in Europe.
obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said you're kind of an engineer by trade or more on the commercial side?
So for me, I started as engineer, but quickly moved over to the dark side, so to say. So got into kind of leading projects and then customers and sales. So I was working in my first job was a really fast growing private company where I started as engineer, work 9 months as an engineer, then became a different kind of leadership assignments in that company, which grew a lot in those years, so to say.
It sounds like
So
you have a knack for leadership. Like it's something that it sounds like something that you've always kind of been drawn to, and that the entrepreneurs or the companies that you've worked with have given you that opportunity. Is that a fair statement?
yeah, I would say if we zoom out, this region where Hermans is located, it's called Ostrobotnia. So it's on the west coast in the middle of Finland. And here, after the war, World War II, actually the only choice you had was to establish your own company to survive. So therefore, we have a lot of entrepreneurs here. I was also grown up in an entrepreneur family with the own company run by my parents, which my grandfather started and
Which kind of
so on.
company? What was the company?
It's like a grocery and hardware store.
Okay.
So it's now in the fourth generation, so run by my wife. So this is a little bit the heritage, and I think that's why we have a lot of companies here, small, mid-size, and everyone are living by export because our domestic
Right. There's
market
not
is too
enough.
small.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's not in that sense. I wouldn't call it drawn to leadership or anything. I think it's the way that many
Necessity.
people are here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's interesting because so your traditional kind of go find the job, get the salary, get the pension, that kind of we say in Italian the tom tom, which is just like that rhythm. It's not a huge part of your, it sounds like, of your culture of the area where you grew up. So it was always kind of like you had to kind of kill what you wanted to eat if you wanted to survive.
Yeah, that's the heritage. Then, of course, we have the same modern problems as elsewhere in the modern Europe as well. So I wish I could say it goes for the entire country, but obviously not. So I think we have probably to find back to that more.
Well, yeah, I mean, the the entrepreneurial spirit isn't for everybody, but it definitely is something that's important for countries and for cities to be competitive. So I guess then you've got this entrepreneurial background. You've got it sounds like you've got a lot of opportunities. Your family's entrepreneurial. So tell me about Hermans and tell me about a little bit about the background. Hermans, what do you guys make? It's grips, lights,
Yeah.
but
So Hermans is actually the surname of the founder, Bernhard Hermans, who founded the company 67 years ago. And he started by making rim tapes. So, that tape protecting the rim from cutting sharp holes in the tube, so to say. So this he started with, and this is still one of our categories where we are market leader. So it's still in our product range. Then from that, we start to develop. So actually, the next step was to produce grips, so handlebar grips for bikes. And then product by product, we started to produce reflectors, develop and produce reflectors, chain guards. And then actually we had the first LED-based bicycle light in the world. That was end of 80s, so 1990, somewhere around. We actually developed that. It wasn't a success at that point, but it was the entrepreneurial spirit. Somebody tried, and then this was kind of spinned off to be enlarged, meaning that we start to make subcontracting for working lights. So big lights for, big brands like Caterpillar or nowadays John Deere and those big players. And from that, actually, we developed both that industry and the bicycle industry. So if I then fast forward to 2019, the company was privately owned until 2019.
And
At
you said
that
that
point,
the main,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure
yeah,
we're on the same page. So you were doing rim tapes, you were doing grips, and then you had some OEM, I guess you could say LED manufacturing contracts with some big manufacturers, it sounds like.
yeah. So that was maybe further on. So I would, if I take one step back, so we started with the rim tape was the first, then grips, then some reflector and chain guards, and then lights. Then when we enter into the lights, we find some path which was kind of exactly like you said, OEM-based production to make some housing and some optical components for larger working lights for
Sure.
other industries.
Sure. And that's more of a cash flow opportunity. It wasn't something you guys did, it sounds like, deliberately. It was just something that kind of happened, but the cycling was always the focus. Is that fair?
Yeah, until I would say late 90s, beginning of 2000, whereas we actually were pioneer to build a brand called Nordic Lights, and that company, that is a company name also. So that brings us to the 2019 when we had the new investor coming in. We actually split that Hermans company into two. So one was Hermans Bike Components, where I am, and what we are talking about today, and the other was Nordic Lights, which was completely then focusing on these working lights. So
And
we
that's
had like a,
that's a
yeah,
separate entity today that's
it's a
still, oh,
complete separate entity nowadays.
okay. And
But the
why
heritage came from one.
why did why did the owner sell?
At this point, I think it was two business units that needed to get attention on their own customer and markets and get own kind of attention, own processes, and so on to
Investment.
actually grow. Yes,
Investment. So
yes.
we're talking about the classic founder run, founder led, where they say, look, for us to get bigger, either I've said this in a lot of podcasts,
Mm,
and I've heard this from my good friend John, who is a management consultant. He always said that either you're a gem or you're scaling,
mm.
but you can't be in the middle, because if you're in the middle, it's hard to you just have to have some sort of direction where you're either very, very niche or you're scaling up. And it sounds like that the owner was like, look, I can only do so much by myself here, and I need help. Is that what happened?
Yeah, so it was several owners, private owner at that point, and also majority of them were actually working in the company at that point. But also, I mean, they were in that sense also getting to a point where they saw there needs to be some kind of new things happening here for us to grow forward. They saw they have a good opportunity, but also there was necessary to do something. Uh, and then I was actually then contacted at the final run when this deal was about to be made, and then the mission was actually to be part of to split the two companies to actually grow this bike component part of it to the next level. So I think that's what we did. So in 2019, 2020, we made the split, made completely own management teams, own boards, and so on, and from that actually both were able to then prosper. So the Nordic Lights, that company went to IPO actually, and is today bought out by a US based company, Method. And then
So that was a
what we're
strong.
focusing on today is the Hermans Bike Components, who is still kind of owned by this private equity company, Sponsor Capital, who came in 2019.
So this capital, this like this is a lot of the stories that I tell her about Dan, that I tell about cycling, has a lot of the private equity stories have been very, very difficult,
Yeah.
because a lot of them happened in 2020, 2021. And as
Mm.
you know, that was not a great time to be buying a bicycle company. I did have a conversation with Stan Steinbrenz from Vittoria and Vittoria Tires, and they're out on a very good path. And they had a similar path as you, where some investors came in before COVID and gave them some support, and I think that that company's doing quite well. So it sounds like this is a more kind of traditional private equity comes in, provides fuel to the machine, and the machine grows. And so, as you said, Nordic Lights, this industrial lighting specialist, was grown, was sold, when IPO'd, and then sold, and so the private equity company was able to kind of complete the circle and exit. Sounds like in a really good
Yeah,
way,
that part of the business. And
right?
then we continue then to focus on Herrmans Bike Components. And I would say for the company Herrmans Bike Components, it was really crucial also because in our strategy we actually made it really clear that we now focus on the bicycle industry, and we also focus in particular on e-bikes, and actually put a lot of investments in both lights and grips, especially the lights for the e-bikes, which is kind of also one of the key to success going forward, that we actually invested a lot of time and money in those product segments, so to say.
So I guess, and where were you at in all of this, going from your initial collaboration and then all the way through to the I guess the refocus of cycling? Like what was your role in the company?
So I would say that we actually started from a long heritage, but to basically to clarify. So for me, it was we were actually putting together a new management team. So that is, if I really take my starting point is, okay, how do we put together our management team now? And then from that, then together with the board, developing the strategy and the clarity on the direction for the company, basically. So it was splitting the two companies to two separate with its own, process, management system, ERPs, whatever. And of course, the more important, the strategy and the teams as well. So this was kind of my starting point in the company as well.
You came in 2019. No, I
Yes,
thought you'd been
2019. Yes.
2019 is when you came
Yeah.
on. Okay, so you've been with the company for a little over 6 years now.
Yeah. So 7 years, and this is the eighth running on for the moment. So
Okay. And so your kind of mandate was, okay, let's structure this business and let's get it growing and let's figure out exactly what we do what we do well and do it better.
yes.
And that was in your project was e-bikes.
Yes, I would say if to put out one important area, it's that for sure.
Okay. And so tell me now about what happened between then and now, because I know that you had mentioned that you guys really went deep with a deep focus on OEM,
Mm.
where you were providing, would you call it white label
Both and yes, but really strongly white label, I would say, historically at least. Yes.
as a manufacturer?
Yeah.
And what are you guys doing better than the competition to get like to be successful throughout this period of expansion that you've had in the last few years?
So I would say if we take the last 7 years. So I think a focus on e-bike and e-bike lights, really trying to find like a better light for a reasonable price. I think that was one of the keys. So when of course all companies basically in the industry grew, after COVID, so 2020 to 22. When we look at it, of course, we also grew, but we grew more than I would say market in these categories where we invested. So if you take one single area, it's within the grips and the lights. I think we were able to actually capture a good piece of market share by really focusing on that area.
And
So
how did you get these contracts? This was trade shows, this was sales team. I mean, you guys are out, you guys are
yes, both
attacking.
and also, I mean, we have to take maybe one step back. We decided for pretty big investment in making automated production for these kind of products, so for the lights. And what I mean by that is it's not that there are some existing standard solutions on the market how to make it. So you have to basically tailor the cells to produce lights automatically. So so I think one key is of course design and the technical spec and the price point, but to get to the price point also we have a highly automated production also for the lights, which is typically quite labor intensive, the final assembly
Sure.
and stuff like this. So when we look at one key competitive advantage is that as long as we are able to develop automated solutions, you then also need some volumes. So they are connected. Without volumes, it's very difficult business cases because still the unit price is reasonable or relatively low compared to the investment. So you need volume. So I think where we have been successful is where we have been able to also automate at the same time. So both grips, lights, reflector, and rim tape are really highly automated production, the
In Europe
majority
or
of the
in
product
Asia?
in Europe. So
In
we
Europe.
produce
Wow.
completely in Finland here
Wow.
in the West
And you're
Coast.
competing with Asia.
Yes.
Just blows my mind because so and then the flexibility and the speed to market it sounds like could be an advantage as well.
Yeah, I think the closeness to the market and of course then these softer things like the relations and the service and everything, I think it gives a competitive advantage. And to be harsh, I mean, lead time is also something which is probably more and more valued because you want to keep control of your inventory. And of
Sure.
course, then lead time
Yeah.
is one way to prevent excess inventory. So, but of course, the speed is key, and I think, of course, there is a lot of good Asian players
Of
with
course.
really high
Of
speed on
course.
developing and everything.
Yeah.
So I would say we have to find different ways and maybe also be a little bit more focused to not try to go on everything, so to say.
Right, right,
So
right, right. Yeah, it's focus. And, I have all these conversations and, I apologize for the listeners because it's starting to sound like a broken record, but to be successful, you have to have very clear focus. You have to make bets and you have to be deliberate about the things that you're doing and what you do well because you can't do everything. And it sounds like that was a clear choice that you guys made. So now you make it through COVID. It sounds like you guys had good profitability through COVID and you were able to. Did you feel the negative effects of the COVID, we'll call it crash?
yes, I must say it's if I compare to in my previous then job during the financial crisis, this was 2008,
Right.
9, in the industries it was a little bit later. So then we felt it went to 2009. It was similar drop actually in percentage. So a huge drop in revenue from one year to the other. But the symptoms were the same. Customers ordering more and more, and then lead time goes longer. Then you order more to make sure you get it. And of course, as a supplier in this case, I remember I also said it that it was already 21 and then beginning of 22 that this is not the real demand. And we tried different ways to kind of assess that, okay, if somebody ordered more than 10% than the last year or something, trying to check. But yeah, it's easy to say. I mean, you don't turn down on orders. So what can you say? Okay, send your order to someone else. Or
Yeah, I don't.
so I mean, you are there, and everybody were enjoying the party, and but the similarities was exactly the same as I experienced then. That it's this kind of psychological loop where you have to get something to make sure you get it, and then you place the orders. And then, of course, 23, the party was over. Let's say it in this way, and then started the cancellation, or already 22 in the
Sure,
second half,
the
of course.
fall.
Yeah,
So, what did that look like for you? It sounds like you have automation, so you guys must have hired, but with the automation capabilities, it sounds like there was some elasticity to the production. Is that a fair statement? Or like how did it
yeah.
pragmatically
I
affect you? Did you have to lay off people? Did the investment firm have to put money in the company to keep the lights on?
I would say it like this, that the first thought was, of course, yes, we have an issue. Will it last 1 year or 2 year or 3 year? Of course, the ones who are saying they knew it will take 3 or 4 years are probably lying. I didn't hear anybody talk like this.
Right.
So it was basically the most of the industry people thought that we need one season now to sell it off. Then maybe
Right.
there was some more negative person saying maybe we need even 2 seasons to sell it off. So I think we started by adapting first to a lower level of revenue. So we did some restructuring already then in 23. And then we followed the situation and actually adapted several rounds, step by step. And I think 2023, of course, like many, we were not adapted to that market because we were actually recruiting and building our
Sure.
team to really
Capabilities. Yeah.
manage a
Right.
much
Right.
bigger business.
Yep.
So, and our strategy is still like on the growth side. So, I mean, it was not only organic growth. We're looking on the entire map, how to grow. But then, of course, you have to take one step back. And after 23, you realize that, yes, it will not be okay at 24. And then you have to kind of adapt step by step. And then eventually, after several rounds of trying to adapt both the kind of the office side and the production to the current market situation, I think last year we finally kind of be back on this kind of a level. So it's on a healthy level, so to say. So I think it has been really tough years for us and other in the
Everybody.
industry as well.
And so you mentioned this was kind of the core of the conversation that I wanted to get into. So you're doing really optimizing this company from 2019 until 2023 to
Yeah.
be an exceptional European-based manufacturer for
Yes.
e-bike lights and e-bike grips,
Mm.
right? This is what
Yes.
you guys wanted to do well, and it sounds like you did do it well. You do it well. Then I presume what now was it always in the cards that you wanted to become a manufacturer that it also is a brand, or was this something where you guys sort of said, we need this because right now the business is we need to have to not only you but like everybody who did OEM or who does OEM realizes we also need to have aftermarket because that's where a lot of business is happening right now. And that's also a healthy business. So can you tell me about how this aftermarket strategy came to be? Was this something always in the roadmap, or was this something that you guys kind of pulled forward as a necessity?
I think in 2019, we said that we need to now kind of make a clear aftermarket strategy to start growing on that. But then I would say that as the business OEM side was having such a momentum
Success.
then in
Yeah.
2020, 21, it was more or less put on hold. So
Sure.
we, in that sense, that we delivered what the customer asked for. So if they wanted like aftermarket pack product from us, we made it in that sense. But we didn't like work on the market systematically or with a clear strategy.
Well, because aftermarket is a whole nother beast.
It is,
It's a
it is,
completely different beast.
yes,
And this is, kind of where I wanted to get to in this conversation was aftermarket is hard,
yes, indeed.
very, very hard. But if you do it well, it's an annuity that pays for a long, long time. So now you have this need, desire to be an aftermarket brand. And so what do you do? What's going on here? Like, tell me about what the plan is and how you guys are enacting this plan. Because to build a brand from nothing, which obviously not nothing, but to build a brand is hard. You guys do have cash flow. You're not starting from nothing. I mean, you have, I presume you guys have, you'll have already momentum in the market. So now what is the plan here and how are you guys doing this?
Yeah, so then I would say 2024 mid second half, we again kind of took the plans forward and okay, how do we now really make some kind of development step in the aftermarket? So then actually we decided to first we need to be more present on the market, and then we choose the DACH region and more specifically basically Germany, because it's the one of the biggest market, of
Sure.
course. So therefore, we employed actually, like, you could call it sales promoter. I would call it more like a aftermarket sales manager, actually with the mission to visit dealers. And it's a journey to start to understand in a way that how should we build a scalable aftermarket business. So obviously, of course, our intention is to sell products on the aftermarket, but it's kind of we work with the big distributor, we work with the dealers. So we are visiting the dealers to understand and to create demand. And then, of course, we work with the wholesalers in order to supply with the needed lead time. Because as you said, when you are OEM, it's big boxes you deliver. It's a completely different product and different process. Whereas the aftermarket is few pieces, very quick response time is needed. And of course, in the same factory, it's possible, but it's a challenge.
Well,
So you
in
need to find. Yeah,
OEM, they tell you what they want, right?
yeah,
And you work with them to find what they want as well, or what the market
yeah.
wants. In aftermarket, this is a mature, I presume it's pretty mature, but have you guys then identified some categories where you think that there's opportunity?
Yeah, so what we did already some year before, so this was maybe in 21, 22, is Hermans is our kind of company name, and it's the known brand in the OE. But Hermans as such, as a brand, it's not that known, obviously, in the
Aftermarket.
other areas. So actually what we did is we created like product brands. So Nordic is the product brand for our lights,
Okay.
and then Nucor is the product brand for the grips. And from there, we have started to kind of develop those two products brands. And these are the one we are really promoting, these two categories for the aftermarket as well. And it has that effect, of course, that many of the OEM also have their own aftermarket, or they have their own, there are own dealer networks and so on. So you get that synergy as well at the same time. So so I think we are still, I would say, still on a journey for sure, but at least now with dedicated resources who are only working with the aftermarket, whereas before it was maybe more like something we also do at the same time as the OEM, which I don't believe is, you will never succeed like this if you want to really scale it later on.
So it's
So
you've almost separated the company again, like you did previously, where you've got these internal departments which are dedicated to the aftermarket
I would say for the moment it's more like because it's
division,
only few persons, but it's
right?
really persons who are dedicated only for aftermarket to make sure that they are then working on that part, so to say.
Sure, sure. And so we're early. You're still pretty early in this process,
Yes, I would say so for sure.
and so we're talking probably about 95% still OEM, 95%.
It's no, it's like maybe today it's around 85% OEM, something like this. So
Okay.
still very early indeed.
Okay. Well, wow. It's and how this is not easy. It sounds like you've got a couple of decisions to make, but you said that you're starting with real focus, and through these this contact in the market, you're trying to find, okay, where is the opportunity? Where can we place ourselves in this market? And then from that, you'll then make reactions to the product line, to the catalogs, and then that
Yes,
sort of
exactly.
evolves from there.
And we have, of course, also like the second hand or leg on this is that we have an agent network also, and some of the agents are also really strong in the aftermarket. So obviously they are also helping on that part. But like own dedicated resource, I think it's also very important to have your own understanding on what's really kind of what's needed in the market, so to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like that's the only way you're going to get in, because
Yeah,
if you go in and you try and make something that is already in the stores, already at that price point, they're just going to be like, why do I need this? I've already got
yeah,
this, right?
exactly.
And so this is the journey. And is it more on the grip side or on the light side, or are you guys kind of still working through where the opportunity is?
I think it's very competitive, both of those areas. So I think it seems that both are applicable, but on the light side, obviously, when somebody buys an e-bike, for example, very few upgrade their lights. So it means that on the lights category, it's more like a opportunity if you look at gravel or some kind of trekking bikes going outside where it's not e-bike, where you add something on afterwards. It's a
Sure.
bigger opportunity, which
It's
is a
the
little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, so upgrade is definitely, at least from my experience, the upgrading is to get started is where probably where you have to live
Yes.
initially. And so you're saying that in the e-bikes, typically it's not something that people do, but in gravel and I suppose also in mountain biking,
Yes.
upgrading is sort of the mentality of the consumer. So you're
Yes.
talking probably high end, higher end or
Yes.
tech. Okay.
Indeed. And
Yeah.
in the lights, we have test winning lights and so on. So it's not about the technology and design and so on. It's more like what you're also highlighting. I mean, to get the real presence there and to make sure that the consumer knows about us, which in the end also, of course, the dealer see that it's a value to have our product on the shelf. On the grips, I think we introduced some the new core range with a bio-based material with a modern design and ergonomics, with also a little bit more fresh, different color palette and so on, which draws the attention, of course, for the consumer. So for the grips, there are some still upgrading and replacement as well, so to say. But it's again maybe more on the mountain bike, maybe some e-bikes, but it's again a little bit more the question there, where is the real potential, so to say.
But it's a
So
process. It's an
it is,
iteration where you guys go, you try, you one season comes through, and then as the time goes by, it's something that grows. But as long as you're
yes,
focusing on it, um, and providing, obviously, doing the right moves, doing the right implementations from a distribution standpoint, yeah, I mean, this is it's super interesting, and I'm really glad we were able to talk today. Dan, this was a lot of fun. I think we gave people a little inside view into the Nordic manufacturing, which I've never done before, never been able to do before. So I appreciate it. To kind of close things out here, if people want to reach you, where's a good place they can do that?
yeah, I think the traditional platform of LinkedIn is probably a good choice to find me. And obviously, also directly contact email or phone. You can find it also there. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, for taking the time, giving us insight into this interesting kind of line of business that you're in. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see each other at a trade show very soon.
thanks a lot
Okay.
and
Take
enjoy
care.
the day.
You too. Bye.